Watch this.
I liken it to like a tree, right? Over time, a tree just keeps growing, and sometimes you need to trim back the branches.
And the wood chipper is warming up. Idaho DOGE is one step closer to recommending an elimination of employees and possibly agencies, a cleanup that could come with a lack of communication and consequences. Paychecks on pause and food assistance is next. The impact of the federal shutdown keeps widening. But what about for those whose vote is keeping the shutdown going? Well, they're covered, thanks to how they voted decades ago. 60 years ago, a Payette, kid hit a World Series home run at Dodger Stadium. Now Idaho Public Television's telling the story of how Harmon Killebrew's bat and his heart made him a legend far beyond baseball.
I think you see like a complete picture of a person. It's not just all these accomplishments on the field.
You know, the analogies of tree trimming or cutting the fat have been used a lot with regard to Idaho's government bureaucracy lately, with many lawmakers looking for the shears or even the scalpel. Idaho DOGE Task Force, or Department of Government Efficiency, is looking into whether some government jobs and even entire state agencies are still necessary. As Hunter Funk explains, the task force is going through the state's payroll and the programs and making a list. What about checking it twice? Well, that's going to be somebody else's task.
Inside the State House, Idaho's DOGE task force is preparing to recommend potential state employee position eliminations, as well as agency, board, and commission repeals or mergers.
As it's been said before, this is going to be a multi-year process. There's a lot to look at and a lot to get through, but we're hoping in these next couple of meetings we can put forward some recommendations and have some things to carry forward into the legislative session.
Task force members reviewed hundreds of state positions that have been vacant for at least 6 months, 381 to be exact. That includes everything from state troopers and trial attorneys to nurses, engineers, and social workers. The question now, if those jobs haven't been filled, do they still need to exist?
And that's what I think JFAC's job will be, is to dig into the weeds on some of these.
Some lawmakers agreed it's worth reviewing, but not removing the funding just yet, especially for newer agencies like the State Public Defender's Office, which is still trying to hire.
We all know that there has to be backstories to these, and I know I'm a broken record. Our agencies experience leadership transitions and turnover, and those directly impact hiring of some of these positions.
Some worry cutting positions without talking to the agencies could have unintended consequences. Ultimately, the group voted unanimously to forward the vacancy report to JFAC, the state's budget writing committee, for review for next month. Unfilled jobs weren't the only thing on the chopping block. The task force also looked at agencies, boards, and commissions, 13 of them so far, that might be merged, moved, or eliminated altogether.
To date, the impact team has looked at 1 through 6. We are working hard on 7 and 8, and we feel that the governor's office and staff it would be beneficial if they provided what they envision when it comes to 9 through 12. And then 13, we are looking at, but having a hard time finding why it's no longer necessary versus is it just no longer want to do.
Among those, they look to eliminate Big Payette Lake Water Quality Council, the Idaho Honey Commission, and the Columbia Compact Commission. Others, like the Sheep and Goat Health Board and the Bingo Raffle Advisory Board, could be rolled into larger departments. Lawmakers say many of these groups are outdated, dormant, or simply doing work duplicated somewhere else. Cleanup that could be done through Idaho's new Code Cleanup Act. A few have been submitted, but most are still being researched. It has some groups on edge about what could come next.
I've heard that the Lakes Commission from Bonner County could be on the soon or is on the low-hanging fruit list.
Sandpoint Representative Mark Sauter spoke up for one local entity, the Lake Pend Oreille Basin Commission, which helps manage lake and water issues in his region. He warned the task force that eliminating it could silence a vital voice in protecting North Idaho's resources.
It's an active group. It means a hell of a lot to us and our district and our state, and it's the voice of our state government as well. So
For now, the DOGE task force can only recommend changes, not make them. Those suggestions will go to lawmakers in next year's legislative session, where Idaho's idea of efficiency may face its first true test. The DOGE task force meets again November 19th, where they are expected to recommend even more agencies for review. Any changes, though, again, would still have to pass through the full legislature next session.
The full legislature, meaning somebody would have to create a bill, it'd have to go through committee, then public hearing, so anybody would have anything to say about those things being eliminated or merged. That's their opportunity to do that.
Nailed it. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that. Thank you very much, Hunter. Well, government efficiency seems to lead nicely into an example of government inefficiency and the continuing shuttering of our federal agencies and programs, and leads us into today's viewer question. The shutdown has now reached day 27, the second longest lapse in funding in U.S. history. The 12th failed vote coming late last week, which means federal food aid, SNAP benefits for 40 million Americans, well, they will not be issued for the first of next month. Last Friday, federal employees missed their first full paycheck, and who knows if military members are going to get paid this week, which is why Tom from Meridian wants to know, during this government shutdown, are our lawmakers still receiving paychecks? And if so, why? Well, short answer to that, Tom, is yes, they are receiving their paychecks. And here's why. It's in the Constitution. Yep. It's in the Constitution, a first clause of Article 1, Section 6, the compensation clause, they call it. Senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. And it's that last part where we find the distinction. While it is paid out of the Treasury of the United States, Congress, well, the congressional pay, I should say, has been funded by a permanent appropriation since 1983, thanks to a law passed in 1982, which means legislative pay doesn't have to go through an annual budget process. It's just permanent. It happens. Nor can it be changed, thanks to the 27th Amendment, which says any adjustment in pay can't take effect until after the next congressional election. Most of our members of Congress make about $174,000 a year. Some of the higher leaders in these houses, they make a little bit more. And they have since 2009, that same total, $174,000. However, over these last few weeks, several of them from both sides of the aisle have chosen to forego their paychecks during the shutdown or donate them, including Idaho Senators Mike Crapo and Jim Risch, who since the beginning of the shutdown have asked to withhold their pay for the duration of the shutdown. Of course, that money doesn't just disappear. It will go into a separate account, and they will have access to it when it's all over. We have reached out to Idaho's congressmen, that'd be Mike Simpson and Russ Fulcher, to see if they too are joining the ranks of the unpaid, but we have yet to hear back from them. You know, we know there are many of you who like to comb through arrest pages of your local sheriff's office, perhaps looking for neighbors or maybe well-known people or just the unusual booking photos. I mean, there are entire social media sites dedicated to such things. And for those who scroll the Ada County arrest page, you may have noticed an uptick in a certain crime over the last several months: illegal voting. But before anyone runs with the headline, rampant voter fraud in Ada County, well, the Sheriff's Office and the Secretary of State, they want to clarify that a bit. Voter fraud and election security have been a political talking point the last several election cycles, especially coming from the White House and even Idaho State House. Back in July of 2024, Governor Little signed an executive order to make sure only U.S. citizens can vote in Idaho elections. That was reinforced by voters agreeing to amend the state constitution in November of 2024, even though Idaho laws already prevent non-citizens from voting. However, it did lead to an Ada County Clerk's office to audit the 2020 and 2024 Idaho elections. And that deep dive led to 37 investigations being referred to the Ada County Sheriff's Office, who in turn arrested 8 people as of last week. Of those 8 people, 7 were convicted felons who were still under their sentence, meaning they were either still in prison or still on probation or parole, and they can't do that. The other, who was a non-citizen, was in the country legally, but not eligible to vote. ACSO wants to make clear these cases had nothing to do with messing with voting machines or anything that could have altered the result of any election. But of the nearly 554,000 people who voted in Ada County in 2020 and 2024, 37 of them, they say, were questionable, and only 1 was from a non-citizen. The rest, well, they were either cleared or still under review and investigation. And we did look today. There were 3 more arrested for the same offenses over the weekend in Ada County. And their names show up under Idaho Department of Correction as well as being on parole. So we assume just put those in the pile of the 7 that were already there as those just violating their federal, or I should say felony paroles. He wasn't just a power hitter. He was a powerhouse of kindness. Harmon Killebrew's story goes beyond baseball and highlighted in a new documentary. Any chance you saw anything that inspired you to join the 208 conversation? Text us. Send us a message to 208-321-5614. As always, include your name and the hashtag #the208. If it's clean, concise, and you know what? We really like clever. It might be your best chance to see yours shared at the end of the show. Well, the World Series picks back up tonight from Chavez Ravine. LA Dodgers welcome Toronto Blue Jays for Game 3. It's the 13th time the Dodgers have played in a World Series in Dodger Stadium. 60 years ago, an Idahoan stood in that same spotlight, playing for baseball's top prize. Harmon Killebrew of the Minnesota Twins from small-town Payette faced the same task of taking on a high-powered Dodgers team. Killebrew did hit one home run in that series in Game 4 in Dodger Stadium off Don Drysdale. However, the Twins would lose the series in 7 games. And Killebrew, well, that would be his last chance at a title. But in terms of lasting legacy, Killebrew more than left his mark on baseball and humanity. And it's the subject of a brand new documentary set to air on Idaho Public Television next week. Joe Paris learned more about it.
Drysdale gets 2 quick strikes on Killebrew in the Twins' 4th. Then the killer connects, and he knows it's gone. It sails high and deep into the bleachers for at least a 420-foot drive.
It's been 60 years since Harmon Killebrew belted a World Series home run at Dodger Stadium, an Idahoan at the center of the sporting world.
To describe Killebrew, he would be like one of the superstars of our time, just in the 60s. He was, for that 10-year period, he was one of the best players. You know, he was right behind probably Mantle and then a couple others.
Eric Westrom is producer, writer, and editor of a new Idaho Experience documentary focused on the Idaho baseball legend.
So I grew up as a baseball fan, and I'd heard the name Harmon Killebrew before. I think one of my grandfathers had probably given me a book, and at that time Killebrew was, I don't know, 4th or 5th all time as a home run hitter. And I grew up in Montana, close to Idaho, and I saw, oh, this guy's from Idaho. Oh, that's cool. And it was something that was in the back of my head for a long time.
Harmon Killebrew, Idaho's big-hearted slugger on Idaho Public Television, explores a legacy that extends far beyond baseball. A former KTVB staffer, Westrom heard the stories from a familiar voice.
A former anchor here, Mark Johnson, was good friends with Harmon, and so we'd do these stories, and I'd be like, oh, he does some really nice stuff away from the field, and I was like, that's really cool. That's something we should know about.
Killebrew passed in 2011, but his name remains a powerful force for good.
The Killebrew Thompson Memorial Golf Tournament, which was founded, one of his teammates and friends, Danny Thompson, died of cancer, and he wanted to do something because not a lot was being done in the field of cancer research at that time, and that's 49 years later, here we are, still going, and they've raised close to like $25 million. Then you also have the Miracle Fields that are across the country, but there's also one in Payette, and they're designed for kids and adults with special needs to play baseball.
Baseball was a vehicle for Killebrew to help thousands, but as the documentary follows, it's a story of happenstance and persistence for arguably the Gem State's greatest pro athlete, one that could have easily never happened.
Yeah, if it wasn't for a U.S. Senator at the time, Herman Welker, who kept bothering the Washington Senators owner, hey, I've got this, I know this kid from where in Idaho that's so good, you have to go see him. And he kept pushing and pushing, and finally the owner got tired, and he sent his head scout out here to see him. And that's another story there. You know, he came out to see Killebrew play, and it's raining, and they're trying to, like, he came all the way from Washington, so it's like they kept waiting and waiting, and the legend is they burned gasoline on the field to dry it out. Eventually, he got to see him play, and he belts like this 400-plus foot home run as a 17-year-old kid, and he calls back to Washington and says, "We've got to sign him."
The rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history.
And I left from this train station here in Fayette and went to the big leagues.
In popular culture, Killebrew also had a unique claim to fame, a full hour dedicated to him on Late Night with David Letterman.
He was originally supposed to be on the show, I believe it was 1984, 85. Got bumped because a guest ran long on a segment. Letterman felt bad, invited him back and did a full hour on Harmon Killebrew, which, according to Mark Johnson, has never been done before or since. And I couldn't find anything. I looked and I was like, this is something.
Westrom says it's what he did off the field that made him truly special. They saw his impact firsthand on everyone they met and interviewed for the show.
I think you see like a complete picture of a person. It's not just all these accomplishments on the field. They were amazing, and he winds up as a Hall of Fame player, but it's after his career, you know, what we were just talking about, like working for, like, wanting to help cancer research, wanting to help special needs, like kids and adults.
Harmon Killebrew, Idaho's big-hearted slugger, airs Thursday, November 6th at 8:30, and then again Sunday, November 9th at 7:30 on Idaho Public Television. It'll also be available for streaming on November 6th at PBS's app or their online video at idahoptv.org. There's also, Brian, what I found was most interesting, a special screening in Payette next Thursday as well. Nice. And they have a lot of things included in the documentary we didn't touch on, like the story of the longest home run hit in Metropolitan Stadium history, why he couldn't actually sign his first professional contract, and a special song that Paul Schaefer actually wrote just for his appearance on the Letterman show.
Check all that out in. And the Killebrew Thompson Memorial every August in Sun
August.
Valley. Yeah.
$25 million. It's unbelievable.
Big name show up there. Big
Chris Berman's in the documentary. They interviewed him up there.
Yep. Yeah. It's a big deal. All right. Thanks, Joe. We'll look forward to that.
Well, it's looking a whole lot more like ski season up at Bogus Basin. Live look. It looks beautiful up there after this weekend's unsettled weather brought a fresh blanket of snow to Idaho's central mountains. And speaking of blankets, I'm sure there's an extra blanket or two on the bed these days as we have some cold mornings coming our way, especially tomorrow. This afternoon, though, hasn't been all that warm either. We're at 47 in Boise right now. The warmest we've been is 48 degrees. Temperatures already on the decline. So that sunshine overhead, very deceiving, about 10 degrees cooler than is typical for the final week of October. Storm system from the weekend well off to the east. Still a few light snow flurries, though, over in eastern Idaho and some clouds moving in from west to east. So for the most part, we should stay mostly clear, but still a little bit of cloud cover overnight tonight in some spots. Boise should stay clear. However, those clear skies, diminishing winds, and our cool air mass will set the stage for our first widespread freeze of the season tomorrow morning. So lots of sunshine coming in for your Tuesday. Temperatures in Boise will warm back to the mid-50s, but look what we'll wake up to tomorrow, mid to upper 20s for many of our Treasure and Magic Valley locations. Check out Stanley, dipping to the single digits early on Tuesday. McCall, you'll wake up to 18 degrees, a nose-numbing start across the region. High temps, though, will inch a little closer to average. We'll hit those low to mid-50s across all of our lower elevations, and that's where we moderate all the way through Halloween, which is looking pretty pleasant, 56 degrees and dry through the work week. Slight chance of a shower, but also warmer to kick off the weekend.
Can the National Guard be deployed to Rose City? Well, that could be decided by tomorrow. And we're leading you into Election Day with a series of debates this week. Here's Abby Wilt with today's 411.
The man accused of murdering two men in North Idaho while on a run from prison is pleading not guilty. Skylar Mead was back in court for his arraignment hearing on Friday. Mead has been charged with murdering James Money and Gerald Henderson. According to court documents, Mead killed the men after he broke out of prison with the help of Nicholas Umpire. That was back in March of 2024. During Friday's hearing, Mead stood silent to both murder charges, so the judge entered not guilty pleas. A ruling over the possible deployment of National Guard troops to Portland is still suspended. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is weighing whether a larger panel of judges should hear the case. The pause is in effect until tomorrow. Meanwhile, a judge in Portland is weighing whether to lift a second temporary restraining order blocking the deployment of troops. Idaho's News Channel 7 is hosting 3 mayoral debates this week on KTVB Plus and KTVB.com. The first is tomorrow, October 28th at 7 p.m. between the candidates vying to be the next mayor of Caldwell. Incumbent Mayor Jerem Wagner is seeking re-election, facing off against current City Council member Brad Doty and former Caldwell School District Director of Public Safety Eric Phillips. Then on Wednesday, October 29th at 7 p.m., 2 of the 4 candidates hoping to replace Nampa Mayor Debbie Kling will also debate here in the KTVB studio. Former City Councilman Rick Hogebum faces newcomer Eric Myricks. And on Thursday, October 30th at 7 p.m., the Garden City mayoral race takes center stage. Current City Councilman Bill Jacobs and the College of Western Idaho trustee Molly Lenti will give their take on the city's future. For more information about the candidates and the qualifications needed to participate in the debate, go to ktvb.com. And for a full breakdown of everything you'll find on the upcoming November election ballot, check out our voter guide. Just text the word VOTE to the number on your screen. That's 208-321-5614. We'll text you back a link to the guide. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Wilt.
JD thinks it's a big deal that both Senators Crapo and Risch have forgone their paychecks during the government shutdown, simply in a performative gesture, he says. They're multimillionaires, suffer no harm. They're going to eventually get the money anyway, right? What a joke. Our DC representatives are simply having their salaries put into a savings account, asked Susan in Meridian, while people who should be receiving SNAP benefits simply lose that money. Is it just me, or does that seem absurd and wrong? Why don't our U.S. senators and representatives donate their paychecks to help fund the national SNAP program? I doubt any of them actually need those checks anyway, says Jason in the 2C. I mentioned a couple of them are. A senator from Florida and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina are donating their checks, not necessarily to that. Not sure where it goes, but we'll see how that plays out. DOGE needs to do actual research and talk to the state entities it wants to recommend elimination. Don't work in a cave, says Kurt in Boise. Well, to be fair, they're doing this job on their own time, so they actually want, well, those who do it for a living to do it when they do it during the session. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.